Have you noticed that this show doesn't have any commercials? I'm not selling you diapers or vitamins or smoothies or gasoline. That's because I don't want any corporate sponsors telling me what I can investigate or what I can say. Instead, you are our sponsors. This is a production by our nonprofit, the Informed Consent Action Network. So if you want more investigations, if you want landmark legal wins, if you want hard-hitting news, if you want the truth, go to ICanDecide.org and donate now. All right, everyone, we ready?
Yeah! Let's do this.
Action. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are out there in the world. It's time for us all to step out under the high wire. True story. Some of you have heard this, but I don't think I've ever shared it on the high wire. Many years ago, when I was traveling the country with Vax, we were in a really big theater, and the film had screened, and after every screening, I was doing Q&As. We did that for an entire year. I've talked a lot about that. But this guy came up to me in a suit, looked really, very conservative. He said to me, I work with the CIA. And he said, see those two guys across the room over there that are also in suits? That's the FBI. I just want to let you know we're following you, we're tracking you, we're watching everything you're doing with this film. And he said, the truth is a lot of us actually like the work that you're doing here, and we think it's important. But I do want to just give you one warning. Don't ever talk about military vaccines. You're going to be fine as long as you just discuss the childhood vaccine program and this autism thing that your film's about. But just stay away from military vaccines. And then he just walked off. Now, the truth is he could have been any lunatic dressed in a suit. I have no idea of knowing. And I tend to just say, I don't know, and I chalk it up to just weird, circumstances. But it's always in the back of my head, Was he real? Was I really being tracked? Were they really, following Vax and what it meant? So as that sits in the back of your head, it's things like that that make moments like this so precious. Take a look.
Under the disastrous Biden administration, this Pentagon waged an unrelenting war on our warriors on many fronts, including when it came to denying them simple medical autonomy and the freedom to express their religious convictions. In other words, our men and women in uniform were forced to choose between their conscience and their country, even when those decisions posed no threat to our military readiness. You know what I'm talking about, what happened, COVID-19 and the vaccine. No more. That era of betrayal is over. Under President Trump, the War Department continues to take decisive action to once again restore freedom and strength to our joint force. We're seizing this moment to discard any absurd, overreaching mandates that only weaken our warfighting capabilities. In this case, this includes the universal flu vaccine and the mandate behind it. The notion that a flu vaccine must be mandatory for every service member everywhere in every circumstance at all times is just overly broad and not rational. Our new policy is simple. If you, an American warrior entrusted to defend this nation, believe that the flu vaccine is in your best interest, then you are free to take it. You should. But we will not force you, because your body, your faith, and your convictions are not negotiable. Your health. It's common sense. It's the kind of common sense approach we're undertaking in this department. Rest assured that under President Trump, the War Department will always honor our brave warriors and do everything we can to restore the American people's trust in their military for generations to come. And that's why I'm proud to sign this new policy.
Well, as many of you know, ICANN and those of you that sponsor the work that we do here, we brought several lawsuits on behalf of the military who were getting kicked out of the military, not having their religious exemptions recognized during COVID. And Aaron Siri, of course, led that charge. We've had amazing testimony. We've talked to some of the, best and brightest of our military who were able to keep working, to keep defending this nation because of the work that we did with ICANN. And really, I want to thank all of you that are sponsors to our work. But I think this is a gigantic milestone. The military has always been just, it's seen as different. Their bodies are owned by the government. They don't have the same rights. They don't necessarily get informed consent the way we should all have it as citizens of the United States of America who did not sign up and hand our bodies to the military. But to see this step, I think, is really spectacular. Of course, it's the flu shot. I'm sure there's many in the military. When I hear what it feels like, after you get the anthrax shot, I think they would have loved to have heard the anthrax shot thrown in there. I hope this is just an opening of a door, and we're going to start seeing informed consent, the right to make your own personal decisions for your body. I mean, look at, you're rushing into harm's way, you're charging bunkers, you're, taking bullets to fight for freedom. I think you should be allowed, whether you want a needle or not, or whether you think that even works. Why can't that be a part of decision making? I will charge that bunker. I just don't want vaccines before I do it. Seems perfectly reasonable to me, and it's great to see Pete Hegseth making that choice. And I think this was one of the biggest announcements certainly we've seen in the vaccine space that didn't involve our HHS Secretary, Robert Kennedy Jr. But I have a sneaky suspicion these guys get along pretty good and probably sat in a couple saunas and chatted. You have to imagine Pete's, while doing pull-ups and competing next to each other saying, hey, Bobby, what's this vaccine thing all about anyway? They seem to be really chummy, and I would imagine that this relationship, as others, we're seeing changes in the USDA. We're seeing the EPA, get involved in certain issues that we care about, the microplastics and investigations. Robert Kennedy Jr. is affecting a lot of different departments around him. I think we need to be excited about that. We need to celebrate that because it also shows, even in the places where he may not, they're not in his jurisdiction, he is still making change up there in Washington, D.C. So good on you, Robert Kennedy Jr. Definitely good on you, Pete Hegseth. I think this is a huge step forward for the military. I hope we see more in the coming days, months, and years. I think of all the people that deserve the right to freedom, it's the ones that are fighting for freedom. And especially when it comes to, your religious rights. If you do not want the aborted fetal DNA or things like that that are involved in vaccines, certainly that should be a part of your conviction. You should be allowed to stand in that. Well, speaking of religious rights, conviction, informed consent, we were just made aware 2 days ago of a story that's really breaking. It's a terrible story that is being seen right now in the headlines up on the East Coast. Long Island family fighting NUMC to prevent tests that could declare crash victim legally dead. It goes on, judge stops brain tests, Farmingdale mom wins order to keep son on life support. What is this all about? This is about a young man who's been in a car accident and is fighting for his life right now. You would think when you're fighting for your life that your parents are able to step in on your behalf and make some of the decisions for you. That has been made incredibly difficult in this situation. I'm joined by Tony's parents now, Tony and Angel. I want to thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know this must be a very difficult time, but when did the accident occur? Let's just quickly find out what puts us in the moment that we're in right now. When was this accident?
April 9th, around 11 a.m., correct?
Yeah.
And was there alcohol involved? What was the situation? Do we have understanding of the accident itself?
He was driving towards the gym a few minutes away from our house, and I guess the police reconstructed his the accident and said he swerved, hit something, and that sent his truck flying through the air, and it came down on the other side of the median on the northbound side of the road, and he crashed into a tree. So when I got that alert, I flew there, and it was bad. He was in the ambulance. They wouldn't let me see him. They told me that he was breathing, and I raced to the hospital where they stuck me in a room, and I had to wait with family members for a little over an hour to find out what was going on with him. I called his dad, who's in Minnesota, and he jumped right on the next plane, and he got here. And this has just been terrible.
I spoke to the police several times, and they really didn't know a lot. They knew that he wasn't speeding. I guess they could tell from the car. And a lot of us, we think maybe he passed out, he like fell asleep, maybe had like blood sugar or anything. We didn't know
Yeah.
exactly what we had to guess. We really don't know what happened.
And the injury, what injuries did he sustain? Did he need surgery? What was the, there had to be some immediate decisions you had to make. Take me through that part of it.
His head went through the windshield, so his skull cracked, and the surgeon came in and said, we need to do a surgery, like immediately. He's not going to make it. Your son is going to die. But I'm just letting you know, we're taking him in there, and he's going to die. He told me that 3 times and said that it's just like the Titanic. It's a sinking ship, and there's nothing that we could do. So I said, you need to fight. Like, don't go in there thinking that. Like, you need to go in there and save my son. He's like, I know. I'm just letting you know what the outcome could be. And Tony, he made it through that surgery, and that was a miracle in itself because everybody was thinking the worst. And then, can you talk, please?
Sure. I didn't get there till nighttime because I had to catch a flight. And when I got there, I spoke to a lot of doctors, and pretty much, they were letting, this is a very confusing situation because
Yeah.
you're hearing one side from the doctors where they're telling you, he has 0% chance and that he's not going to recover, and you need to, we need to give him a confirmation test to see. They're like, we know he's brain dead. We just have to legally prove it, but it was all so fast. We didn't have a lot of time to really like even digest that, and we were trying to research ourselves, because this is our kid. What are we going to do? We have to make the best decision possible, and it was tough. So we ended up buying 2 days, right?
We got extra time, but like if you're a baseball player and you break your arm, they're not expecting you to play baseball 3 days later.
Right.
Like all his trauma was like in this area, and the test that they wanted to do, it's not 100% accurate, and it's all in this area. So he needs time to heal. Like Tony needs time to heal.
I think the main thing too is that I was told that once they give, because I asked them, because I've never been in this situation before in my life, so I asked
Yeah.
them. I said, well, what happens if you give him this test and you confirm that he's brain dead? And they're like, well, we're going to come over and we're going to shut the meds off, and he'll probably survive maybe 15 minutes to an hour, and then you should think about, whether or not, what you're going to do next. And so all that was just like
So this test
blindsided me.
essentially triggers their right to just pull the plug on your son. If it comes out the way they think, where it says whether it's accurate, how accurate it is or not, they use this test to decide. And then really you're left out without any choices now, and they're just going to move on, and you're trying to buy a little time. Is that an accurate idea of you'd like to have some time to heal? You would like to, see, and now I'm
Sure.
just curious, have there any been discussions about organ donation or anything like that? Because I know that oftentimes plays into these conversations. Has that come up at all as a conversation?
Yes, a few doctors in the days after the day of the surgery was asked, what do you think about organ donation? And then one of his other doctors came up to us the other day and said, I guess whatever medicine that he was getting, it's not going the right way, so you should start thinking about organ donation. And then very quick, like she just walked away right after she said that. It was a little shocking.
It was a little cold.
But,
Now, in your, I know that, we've heard, you feel like there's some positive signs that show that there may be brain function there that you would like to be recognized. What are some of those signs that you're seeing? And I know that you really haven't left the hospital throughout this time, so I wanted to thank you for taking the time. You must be exhausted, but what are some of the signs you think are showing that, Tony might still be in there and should be given a chance.
It's very hard because I'm holding my son's hand. I'm talking to him. He's grabbing my hand. He pushed my hand down.
He was tapping
He
our
was
hands.
yeah. He was like almost like it felt like Morse code. He was like trying to talk to me as I was talking to him. And then we were
His
touching
legs.
his feet and making his legs move and stuff like that. But then they would come in and say, it's just his spine, and it's hard.
But like the other night, his whole stomach moved, like he moved his shoulder, like it looked like he was readjusting himself. He did it 2 times, but they're just saying that nope, that's not brain activity.
You
That's
know.
just his spine. But
But he had a lot of damage, and he definitely needs to recover from it. It's not like,
he's reacting to pain.
Well,
Like
it did look.
when
What I think is so shocking about the story, you're the parents, it should be your decision. If you want to have some more time, I don't see what the rush is. There are plenty of other people that are given ridiculous amounts of time. We take giant risks in medicine. In this case, you're just saying, give us a little time. And in fact, you had to bring in an attorney. That's why we know about this. One of your friends is an attorney at the law firm we use, Siri and Glimstad, but you had to bring a temporary restraining order. Is that right? In order to get them to stop from doing this test that will trigger, them to move in a direction that you may not want them to move. Is that correct?
yes, they came in and they said everybody get out of the room, and they're taking him up. And I said we have a court order. It's signed by the judge. You need to get a supervisor. And he was like, nope, sorry, administration said that we're taking him, so you need to get out of the way now. And there was security, doctors, nurses, there was a ton of people coming
yeah,
to
they
take
just took
Tony.
him
Like
downstairs.
it was terrible. And
Even
You
after
couldn't
you
see
had
him.
won the TRO, they were rushing him off to do this procedure.
yes, yes. Like I didn't have the physical piece of paper in my hand. It was on my phone, and I was showing it to them, and they did
They
not
were
care.
waiting for it to upload or
And
something, right?
they just they took him. Everybody started crying, and we started praying, and it was I was really scared. Like I thought that was it. And I don't even know how long, maybe 25 minutes later,
About.
one of the doctors came up and said that they terminated the test. And that right there was another miracle. Like everybody just keeps praying.
You keep saying, prayer
Sorry.
and miracles. Just tell me about your spiritual thoughts on this, or your religious.
Like,
You believe your religious beliefs should play a part in this conversation?
yes, like we're Christian. Like I believe God can heal Tony. He needs time to heal, and God keeps showing us different things every day. Like he keeps us going.
Yeah, he's beating the odds,
And
Every time they say one thing, he beats it. So
it's just if like I know Tony's seriously injured. Like I'm not like I see him. We're here every day. We don't leave, but it's up to God and Tony. Like if it's his time to go, it needs to be on him and like God, not a doctor just saying like we're doing this test and here you go. Like we're pulling the plug. We're killing your son because of this test that's not 100% accurate. Like that's not right.
Is there any
not right.
history of this in that area of people that they've tried to pull the plug, or that hospital, and maybe have made the wrong decision? Have you heard or seen any stories like that?
I feel like everybody keeps sending me different things. I don't know if Jessica's on the line. I feel like everybody's sending us different articles, but I'm not 100%
there's
sure.
a lot, and
Like,
we're all tired. So we're hearing a
yeah.
million stories and
Okay.
trying to, listen to everybody. And
Well, we had somebody come in yesterday who
Yes.
was in a similar situation
she saw
at this hospital.
she saw the article in Newsday, and she came down with her son, and she was here 10 years ago, and she wanted us to meet her son and how he recovered from a similar situation, and that now he was okay. It was a long road, but they made it through. And
He was walking, talking. He gave us hugs. He was talking to Tony. It was
Yeah.
he
Wow.
was a miracle, and like we needed to see that because like we keep fighting, and the doctors are just like there's 0 chance. Like keep believing, but we don't know about miracles. But miracles happen every day. Like
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, let me bring in your attorney, Jessica Wallace, who joins us now, just to give us an idea. Hi, Jessica. Thanks for joining us today. Obviously, this is a very emotional story. But when you got involved, I think it's crazy that you have to bring in an attorney just to give your child some time under a circumstance like this. But tell me, in interacting with the hospital, have you appreciated how they're handling the situation from a legal perspective?
Hi, Del. I mean, legally, there's a lot of different challenges here, and I think it all revolves around the death, what the physicians can use and what the guidelines say in terms of brain death and how they, diagnose brain death. So I think that's where the controversy, comes in this case. It's also, there's religious accommodation for people, but there's an argument over what, when that accommodation should kick in. Is it before the brain death diagnosis? Is it after the brain death diagnosis? So,
is there anything as far as treatment that there's a thought that could be done better prior to this brain death? Are they treating him differently than they should be under the circumstances? Do you think their perspective is changing the treatments that they're doing right now? If they believed he could live, are there things that they could be doing differently, I guess is my question.
So the court order, the stipulated order says that the parties have agreed that there's no predetermination that Tony is brain dead. But from what I've heard from Angel and Tony about the things that they're being told at the hospital when they're asking for certain treatments to be done that would be like a next step, it does appear that the hospital is, is acting in that manner, I guess. So they've agreed that they're not predetermining it, but at the same time, I mean, I think that's probably something that Angel and Tony could comment on, like what they're being told about the next steps. I don't, about what they're being told about the next steps and how they would do it differently if he took the test and passed it versus now.
Now, I know as part of, you must have had to at least submit in court that there's some things that are happening that you feel like shows that the brain is still communicating inside the body. What were some of the things you listed on that as you discussed this conversation?
The main thing that kicked off the TRO was that the parents ended up consulting with an outside expert who in this area of brain death. He's had several cases and he's helped a lot of people. And he had asked us or asked the family, as you said, I'm friends with Angel since. So I have a little bit of personal knowledge here too. Yeah. And the expert, asked if he was getting nutrition and asked about certain lab values. And so when the family then asked about whether he was getting nutrition, they found out he wasn't. And so really? That's what started the whole TRO, was to find out that you're 7-8 days in, and this is about day 5 or 6, I think, and there was no nutrition started for him. So now you have this kid who's got a major brain injury or brain trauma, let's just say, and you giving him, trying to see what progress he's going to make, but then not giving him time to heal, then not giving him the nutrition. So that, they felt, well, that you're not even giving him a chance, even with, and the way that the family has explained this to me is, even with the biggest miracle that God, can do, you can't do it when you're not giving your body the nutrients that our bodies are meant to have from God. So that's what started that. But then there were signs. I mean, a dead body does not, regulate its own blood or does not have a beating heart. A dead body doesn't input and output urine. So there's, I think there's a fine line.
He's laying in the bed. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. No, please tell me what your experience has been.
He's alive. He's laying in the hospital bed. Like, he's there. His heart is beating. I feel his heart breathing. Like, his chest is rising. Like, he's going to the bathroom. Like, you can't be dead and doing those things. Like, he doesn't have a pacemaker for his heart to be beating. His heart is beating. Like, I'm sorry.
So you're really, let's be honest. You're asking the doctors, can we just put aside, I get it, you see a lot of death in here, that's their experience, but can we all just give space for a miracle right now? Could you just be with us in the possibility and not rush into trying to prove he's brain dead? You just want some time, right? Is that really, and then what about a second opinion? Is there any way Jessica, for them to get a second opinion? Can they get to another hospital? What's happening on that front?
That's the goal. The goal, I mean, we do have an independent neurologist that's going to be coming in to do an examination. But honestly, the goal is to get out of, I think, is to have him transferred. And there's some challenges that we're facing in that aspect, just because of the procedures that need to happen. When you initiate a transfer, there's questions over, is it the hospital that has to initiate, the family that has to initiate, so the family's been getting some conflicting information on that end. So we're working on that. The story I was told about the lady who from Angel, actually, that it would probably be better for her to tell it. But the lady had a very incredible story. The woman who came to the hospital room yesterday to see them, whose son was hospitalized there with a similar injury.
Yeah.
As to how they ended up getting out of that situation.
So they were facing a similar situation where the hospital was trying to also pull the plug or just move them into a death position. Was
yes,
that what?
And they didn't want him to leave, and she ended up having to find an outside doctor to admit him into another hospital and sign a piece of paper against the hospital, like I guess their medical advice or whatever, and they got their own transportation to move him to another hospital where he was there in a coma for, I think, maybe 6 months. And then he went, I think, upstate to another hospital as like a rehab type facility.
Well, look, I know you've been
alive and he was talking.
I know you've been through a lot. I don't really want to, drag this out too much longer. I really just want to bring some attention to it. What is it that we have a pretty large audience right now? What is it that we could do to help? We have medical professionals that are watching this. Obviously, we have a very inspired group of activists that, step up and help. So how can we help you in this moment for what is our nonprofit's called the Informed Consent Action Network? We're all about informed consent. You should be informed. You should have the right to make the choices right now for your son. So is there anything we can do to help you right now?
Is there any doctors that would come look at Tony and maybe transfer them to their hospital to care for him? Like, I don't.
It would be nice to hear other people's stories also. If someone has gone through a similar thing, I think yesterday was great. I really needed to hear that story. So if anybody wants to come forward and tell us that story, or any other, doctors, neurologists, anyone who wants to step forward and try to see exactly what's going on. I mean, we need that, and we need that fast, I think.
We need to make sure that
all right.
hospital is...
So if you have any of this information, if you are a medical professional out there in the Long Island area or anywhere near that might be able to get involved or help move Tony to your own hospital where maybe we can get a different look, please reach out to Gestone Help at SiriLLP.com. And I understand you also have a GoFundMe page for anyone. I'm sure, these things get very expensive. They're looking to raise $150,000 to get help in this matter. So if you want to donate, there is the GoFundMe. You can take a picture of that QR code. I just want you all to know that our prayers are with you. We'll do everything we can to see if we can't get some medical experts involved, and certainly, and I also want to say, if you're out there and this story moves you, and we all have, what I think the reason we want to cover this is because this happens to so many people, and it's the first time we've ever seen anything like it. We're not prepared for these moments, but if this is a moment that moves you and you feel like this hospital isn't acting correctly, I think it would be a good time to reach out to that hospital. And why don't you send an email or a phone number? I've got a phone number here. So you can just reach out and say, hey, I support Angel and Tony Gestone. I think that their son deserves the right to have a little bit of time to heal. Miracles happen every single day. There's the number, 516-572-0123. Be polite. I don't want to be attacking the hospital. These, I'm sure, are exhausted, good people that I think are probably a little bit, calloused when it comes to issues like this. But I'm sure it would help for people to reach out and just say, look, I saw this story. It doesn't look good for your hospital. Why don't you do what's right? So look, we're here. We're in your corner. Definitely keep us posted on progress. We'll be praying for a full recovery, and I'd really love to see this situation get easier for you, where you're not having to, stake out inside of this hospital and not leave because you're afraid of what they might do. That is not how hospitals should work. That is not health care. There's no care in it whatsoever. So I want to thank you for taking the time, sharing your story. It's important for all of us because, God forbid, there are people going to be watching this show that will find themselves in a similar situation like this at some point. So all the best. You're in our prayers.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very
Thank
much.
you.
All right, you're welcome. Take care. All right. Well, we have really, I think, a bucket list type interview. I've got William Shaw coming up. You probably haven't heard of this guy. Really, before there was Andy Wakefield, this guy was seeing that there was something in the gut dysbiosis, the intestines and the stomachs and digestion that seemed to be linked to autism. But now he can look at a urine sample, not even know who the patient is, and say, I am looking at the urine of someone with autism. And glyphosate is going to play into this conversation, which is really huge because later on the show, I'm going to talk to Zen Honeycutt, who has been fighting, with moms across America to get the pesticides, the herbicides off of our food. Of course, she's going to be marching with us this Monday at People versus Poison. But first, it's time for the Jackson Report. It always amazes me, these stories where these hospitals, it just feels like they're playing God, Jeffrey. I mean, whether they're dragging a baby from another state to forcibly give them chemo and risk their lives in the process, or a situation like this. Can we give them a month? You allowed 4 weeks to say, can you just let us pray for a miracle right here? I don't know. I don't work in a hospital, but that seems reasonable. And instead, this race to get there. And I'm sorry, but I do question this whole giant market we see in organ donation. Young guy, healthy organs. You just wonder, if that plays into the math, if you will, when it comes to these situations. But anyway, either way, it's an important story, and it's something we should all be considering. What do we think about stories like that?
Yeah, incredibly important story. And, the for-profit hospital model over the last 40 years has only grown, and they've become so powerful. You have to wonder if that factors into this conversation.
Yeah.
And it's great that we have lawyers and medical journalists that will tell this story and get it out there. Preparing for the segment today, I feel like this is one of the most important shows that we've ever done. And I find myself thinking that more and more lately, just because the information is so important and powerful. And it's nice to see other journalists, mainstream journalists, corporate journalists, jumping on the bandwagon of conversations that we've been reporting on for several years now. One of them is Katie Couric. You may have known her from ABC News, CBS News. She's had a major career throughout a lot of the major media organizations. She now has her own outlet, and she was recently speaking, and something stumped her. She couldn't figure out why something was happening. Take a look.
All right.
I had coffee with an oncology fellow about 2 months ago, and she said, I had a very rough day. I just had to tell a 21-year-old college student with no family history that he had stage 4 colorectal cancer. And I'm hearing more and more about people in their early 40s, 30s, even 20s being diagnosed with this disease at an advanced stage, often metastatic colorectal cancer. I can't even tell you guys how crushing it is. And of course, I'm excited about trying to figure out why this is happening. Epidemiological studies are so hard to conduct, but there is something going on in our environment. It's not just obesity or a sedentary lifestyle. It's a confluence of things that include ultra-processed food, maybe microplastic, forever chemicals, overprescription of antibiotics. I don't know what is happening, but something is going on. And there are 17 cancers are increasing among people under 50. So what the is going on?
Indeed, the same question we've been asking, what the F is going on, Katie? But as she gives that laundry list, forever chemicals, plastics, antibiotics, and it just feels like she's missing a category, right? I mean, when I watched this, as soon as I saw this, it's like, there's another category. In fact, all the things you just listed have been going on here for like 40 years, so that wouldn't explain a sudden rise, but something did happen over the last couple of years, just very recently, that might actually, or should be, I think, a part of her investigation. Right, Jeffrey?
Yeah, almost like there's an elephant somewhere in that room.
Exactly.
Your room behind you. It's just a second ago. There's a big elephant here, and it's that experimental shot that was forced on the world's population over the last 5 years. And Katie, I know Katie can do basic research and read basic medical journals, so I want to throw some tips her way, some slow pitch softball here. There are other things besides microplastics and ultra-processed foods. Let's look at this study out of Italy. Let's just go through a couple here. This was a study that looked at patients in a province, Pescara province, from June 21st, about 6 months after the first vaccination, to December 2023. And they found a 23% increase in overall cancers for people that had one or more COVID shots. They found 54% increase in breast cancer for people that had one or more COVID shots. Increases in bladder cancer, increases in colorectal cancer with the shots. That's just one. Here's another one. We have studies here. This is 2026 from a journal called Oncotarget. COVID-19 vaccination and post-infection cancer signals, evaluating patterns and potential biological mechanisms. So these aren't just theories or population studies. It's happening enough where researchers are actually figuring out biological mechanisms for how the COVID shots cause cancer. And here's a final one here from Peter McCullough, Stephanie Seneff, and other co-authors, Autoimmune and Neoplastic Outcomes After mRNA Vaccinations, the role of T regulatory cell responses. Remember, there's evidence that these COVID shots downregulate the immune system, the radar in your body that shows cancer and actually tries to get the cancer before it races to something that is life-threatening. When some amount of people, we don't know how many, it shuts that down. It downregulates that. And we have biological mechanisms now. So I know Katie is a good researcher. She's a journalist. Maybe she can look at this as well. And a lot of people out there, a lot of the public is wondering, where are our federal agencies? The CDC has not updated its dashboard to look at new cancers since 2022.
Wow.
Here's the image here, this cancer tracker. Rates of new cancers, the latest numbers are 2022. And even when they do update it, what's it going to be, 2023? I mean, we're talking 4 years old now. Kind of important because this informs research,
frankly,
drug development.
How hard is that? How hard is that to monitor, right? I mean, that is data every hospital has. By the way, while you're trying to rush and kick Tony out of your hospital and pull the plug on him, while you put a little time into just forwarding your cancer research to CDC and let us know how many patients you had this year. I mean, this can't be difficult to track this stuff. We're supposed to be the greatest nation in the world. We're supposed to have something called a computer, right? Doesn't that do this now? I mean, come on. It's so ridiculous.
And I don't know about you, Del, but I remember sitting through a pandemic recently where they gave us daily case counts of deaths and cases for the COVID pandemic. You're telling me 4 years of a lag on cancer cases. But, we're talking about a massive market share of big pharma's products here. What's another market share that Katie specifically left out, which the science is all but settled? It really can be settled at this point with pesticides. Here's just a smattering of headlines. Cancer is a statewide problem in Ohio, including the pesticide-heavy northwest corner. Another one, Iowa cancer rates surge. Farm chemicals are a key risk. Here's one more. Why are young people getting colon cancer? A common weed killer, maybe linked, scientists say.
I mean, this is why we're doing the People versus Poison rally. I said last week I have been reporting on glyphosate since like 2015. So Katie, we have a march that's happening, a great point you can make. In fact, I know we can find a spot for you on a microphone in front of the Supreme Court. I hope you will join us at the People versus Poison rally. Remember, this is already winning in courtrooms. Billions of dollars have already been paid out because this product is causing cancer for people. It's on 90% of the crops that we eat, or at least 80%, depending on what you look at. So Katie, be a great place to start. Why don't you join us in Washington, D.C. on Monday for People versus Poison. Let's do this investigation together. I mean, let's really put these things on the table.
And Del, I want to switch gears here for a second. And we've alerted people a lot on this. There's a lot of conversation of how many cancers are out there. People I know in their families are experiencing this in their communities. But I want to show a study that slipped through the cracks. It's a somewhat recent study. And I want to present this. Is it possible that researchers have found a cure to cancer? I'll let the audience decide on this. Here is this actual study. And it's found in a very interesting place. Discovery and characterization of anti-tumor gut microbiota from amphibians and reptiles. The key gut bacteria here is Ewingella americana. And it goes in to say this. The researchers say the mechanistic investigations revealed that E. americana, that's the gut bacteria from reptiles, functions through a dual action mechanism, direct tumor cell killing and robust activation of host immunity, leading to enhanced T cell, neutrophil, and B cell mediated tumor attacks. So it's a two-shot deal there. But it goes on to say this. Importantly, the safety evaluations of this, when they use it in the treatment, this was a mouse study, they said it exhibits minimal pathogenicity and exerts no significant adverse effects at therapeutically effective doses. This is huge because we all know chemotherapy, what that does. But then it does something even further. The researchers write this. They give these rats the cancer, they treat it with the gut bacteria, it goes away, but then the tumor re-challenge. They re-challenge these mice that lived with the same tumors. Re-challenge experiments demonstrated complete tumor rejection in all E. americana cured mice. 0 of 10 developed tumors versus uniform tumor growth in naive controls, 10 for 10, providing evidence of durable anti-tumor immunity with immunological memory persisting beyond 60 days. So the body remembers. And I want to show some images from this study. These are really, they tell the story. So starting at the bottom, you see the mouse has the tumor. PBS is the control. That's a saline, phosphate buffered saline. That's the saline.
That doesn't seem to be doing much.
You can see the tumor grows.
It's brutal.
Oh yeah, and the mouse doesn't apparently make it past day 15. Now, the one above that is an antibody that's anti-PD-L1. You can see the tumor shrunk, but not enough. Then Dox. Dox is doxorubicon. This is nicknamed the Red Devil. This is the stuff, this chemotherapy that makes your hair fall out. It's brutal. It's brutal. And you can see it doesn't do much there. Side effects are horrific. And then E. americana at the top, that's the gut bacteria, gone. Day 15. But then another chart another image from this study, you can see the days after tumor implantation and the survival rate. That red line across the top, 100% survival rate with the gut bacteria E. americana. And you can see the black line is the placebo. You can see straight down, you got about 30-day survival rate. And then the rest of them, you have the docs, you have the antibodies, you're looking at about 20 to 40% survival rate there. Not very good. This is a massive, massive study that I haven't seen many people report on, but I mean, the hope here is incredible. If
really
this thing can get streamlined, if they can do bigger studies.
Yeah, I'm about to think when I get done here, I'm going to call Ed Clay and say, are you guys on this? I mean, of course, we interviewed him. He's got that hospital where they're trying all sorts of stuff. And, he said exactly that, right? When he was on here just a few weeks ago, he said, I believe in a very short period of time, we are going to see that we're going to be able to start beating these solid cancer tumors. This certainly looks like a very, very promising thing to look into. And you're right. Again, when we think about risk reward, and risk profiles, safety profiles, you're up against chemo, right? If chemo is the standard of care and you ran this, I mean, what kind of risk we talk about? It sounds like it has some real benefits. Obviously, it's just a mouse model. We don't want to get over the tips of our skis, but boy, you just feel like if the focus of NIH, CDC, FDA, really our hospital system, of pharma was just, let's just stay open-minded. Let's keep trying things instead of locking ourselves in and digging our heels in. Science and medicine could just advance, so fast right now.
And there is a lot of hope. And I want to go into another, however you frame this, another dysfunction of the body or a scourge on society. Regardless, a lot of people are affected. That's Alzheimer's, dementia, cognitive impairment. And we know The actual model that's been directing medicine for over a decade now is the amyloid beta model. So that's basically, there's these tangles that get caught up in the brain around the nerves that really just interrupt the nerve signals. And then you have Alzheimer's, you have dementia, and the brain just succumbs and is overcome. Well, we reported on this when it happened, but that model was based on a paper that looked like it was based on fraud. This was Science Mag, science.org, and this is the actual headline: potential fabrication and research images threatens key theory of Alzheimer's disease. It goes on to say hundreds of clinical trials of amyloid target therapies have yielded few glimmers of promise. However, only the underwhelming Aduhelm has gained FDA approval, yet amyloid beta still dominates research and drug development. NIH has spent $1.6 billion on the projects. And then it goes on to say scientists who advance other potential Alzheimer's causes, such as immune dysfunction or inflammation, complain they have been sidelined by the amyloid mafia. So you have this one dominating theory. This isn't science. You have one dominating theory. You have a mafia around it so they can make maximum amount of profits. And everybody else is pushed out. They don't get funding for their theories. And you have drug competition like this, Aduhelm, which the FDA panel that was slammed. This is Biogen's controversial Alzheimer's med. That was the FDA panel slammed. This was an independent panel, kind of like ACIP. The FDA approved it anyway, and it caused 3 FDA advisors to resign over its approval. That's New York Times when it happened, because it was so underwhelming. But now we have kind of the nail in the coffin here on amyloid beta Alzheimer's therapies. This is out of the Telegraph. Here's the headline: Alzheimer's wonder drugs do not work. Treatment targeting amyloid protein provide no clinical benefit. This is from the Cochrane report. This is the study. We'll go actually to this study here and look at this. And they're looking at these drugs, and we go into the quote. It says anti-amyloid monoclonal antibodies probably cause more brain swelling and tiny microbleeds than placebo. I mean, it's over right there. But then they go on to say this: successful removal of amyloid from the brain does not seem to be associated with clinically meaningful effects in people with mild cognitive impairment or mild dementia due to Alzheimer's disease. This conversation's over. The book is closed. We need to start looking at other things to help people with Alzheimer's. This is a massive issue in America right now. And researchers are doing this. Just like the cancer study we just showed, there's other studies with Alzheimer's patients and mild cognitive impairment that have kind of gone under the radar. One of them was in 2022, and it looked at this: precision medicine as a treatment. What is precision medicine? Well, we'll go into the study and show you. So 25 patients with dementia or mild cognitive impairment were enrolled in this study, and the researchers say this: patients were treated for 9 months with a personalized precision medicine protocol that addressed each patient's identified potentially contributory factors, and cognition was assessed at 0, 3, 6, and 9 months. Now, what did they do? It says the goal was to identify and address the factors associated theoretically and epidemiologically, though in some cases, the researchers said, yet to be proven causally with Alzheimer's disease. They looked at restoring insulin sensitivity. They looked at the cholesterol, resolving inflammation if it was present, removing the causes of inflammation. They treated pathogens. They optimized energetic support like oxygenation, cerebral blood flow, ketones. They looked at their mitochondrial function. I'm going to keep going here. Hormones, nutrients, tropic factors, treated their autoimmunity if they had anything, detoxified if they had toxins like heavy metals and things like that. Now let's look at the chart here from the study. You can see at the baseline, you had about 38%, almost 40% of people. This was the CNS vital signs. This was a well-known test for people with cognitive impairment. And you can see about 38% there on that first baseline. That was the mean right in the middle. But by 9 months, every time they checked in, 3, 6, and 9 months, it improved. And it kept improving up to 9 months with these people. And you'll read this study, and it's comprehensive, it's amazing, what they did.
We took a novel approach. Why don't we just make these people healthy again? Why don't we just forget about the dementia directly and just say, do you have some autoimmune diseases we can clear up? Can we get a better diet going? Can we get you exercising? Can we get inflammation down in your body? Something, by the way, almost every holistic practitioner in the world is doing for people. And, you know, and they would be laughed out of the room if they said, I'm actually having a lot of success just making my patients healthy, right? I mean, it couldn't possibly be a pill. That's fighting something that was a fraud to begin with.
And detractors will look at this study and say, oh, well, that is so intensive with practitioners. You're talking nutrients, DNA analysis, all of these, they're multifactorial practitioners that had to help one patient. But you add it all up and it's cheaper than assisted living. It's cheaper than the actual anti-amyloid medication for a year. It's 20 to 30,000. You add the diagnostic test.
How about
MRIs
the
to that, you're looking at
1.6 billion the
90,000.
NIH just spent funding a baloney, perspective? I mean, why don't we just put that into the system, put that back into the system? Yeah.
Exactly. And also 9 months. Detractors will say, well, that's only 9 months. We're talking, well, fortunately, other researchers took this protocol out longer, over a decade. And this is what they found. Here's the study. Sustained cognitive improvement in Alzheimer's disease patients following a precision medicine protocol. And let's go right to the chart here. You can see they have a handful of patients here. On the left side are their ages, their sex, male, female, all their symptoms. And you can see the highlighted area. Here is the time they improved. They improved for this long, 7+ years, 10+ years, 11+ years. And what's interesting about this chart is some of them had what's called secondary decline. So they improved for all those years, but they had a decline. Why? Well, because most of them, the ones that did have a decline, stopped the protocol. So they had, once they started the protocol back up, they had secondary improvement. They went right back to it.
Wow.
And so this is massive evidence, especially with this administration. Precision medicine is definitely on the front burner. This could be plugged in right now. This could be reimbursed by healthcare agencies, by Medicare, Medicaid. This is a solution. We're reporting on this right now.
I want to make one point too, Jeffrey. When you hear about dementia and things like this, what I always hear is, we have a new treatment. The best we can do is slow it down, but there's no reversing it, right? You hear that over. So can we bring that last slide back up? Because I just want to point out something really fascinating here. Time improved. They improved for 7 years, 10 years, 6 years, 11 years. When did you ever hear that was even possible? I mean, right there, we have been told that is not possible. The best you can do is slow the direction you're already heading in. It's a snowball. You can slow down how quickly it goes down this hill, but there's no reversing that. That document right there tells us there's a different way. I guess we could call it a miracle. Maybe it's a miracle. But whatever the case, I think for all of you, we're all looking at this, right? We have it in family members. I think this is a real sign of hope, Jeffrey, that maybe going to a doctor and packing our relatives full of drugs, which we can tell is not working, I would say, why don't you go to a functional medicine doctor, get to probably a homeopath or a nutritionalist, start working to get all those other, what they're doing, right? Get all those other symptoms out of the way. I've heard the same thing about some of the doctors we've had treating long COVID, right? Instead of looking at it as one single thing, just treat each symptom. If you have inflammation, let's reduce the inflammation. If you're having spasms, how do we deal with that? Do we need steroids? I mean, all of it just addressing the issues that are inside of the body and making the person healthy. It just seems so obvious that I can't believe this should be like breaking news. Being healthy makes you healthier.
Well, maybe this will get out there a little further, so people like Katie Couric and other people that have mainstream audiences that big can actually report on something that matters instead of scratching their head and going, as a journalist, I just don't know what's going on. But we're talking about helping people here, and one of the things that's happening, not in America, is other countries and their governments are starting to help the people who have been injured by the COVID vaccinations. This was the UK, the lead chair of the UK's COVID inquiry. Take a listen to what she had to say.
All right.
Tragically, a number of people suffered harm as a result of having a vaccine. This was a small minority compared to the overall scale of the vaccination programme, but of no less importance to the individuals affected and their families. I heard moving evidence of representatives from the vaccine injured and bereaved core participant groups who have often felt silenced, ignored, or treated as vaccine deniers. Similar experiences were also described to the inquiry through its listening exercise, Every Story Matters. It is vital in the context of a whole population vaccination programme in which the state is asking people to be vaccinated in part to protect others, that people are adequately supported when side effects do occur. A sufficiently supportive government scheme must be in place to help such people and their loved ones. I have found that the current scheme for those who've been injured as a result of having a vaccine, the Vaccine Damage Payment Scheme, is not sufficiently supportive and requires reform.
I said it last week when we were reporting on this, and they don't have Robert Kennedy Jr. over there. And frankly, they have a censorship system where I think if you quoted some of the statements she just made, you might go to jail if you put it on your, Instagram account. But that is astounding. I don't know that we have ever seen that level of recognition by a government agency that vaccine injury is real, it's happening, we should care about these people. That is, I think, historic, honestly.
And this is happening in other countries too. I'm going to go into that in a moment. But she mentioned a small minority. Well, what's that mean? We don't know because the tracking isn't quite there. But we do know this. Here's a headline out of Daily Skeptic. 1 in 7 vaccinated people report a serious adverse event, MHRA finds. That's the Medicines Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. And specifically their yellow card system. People opted into this system to be tracked after the vaccination. And before the vaccination, they were all tracked in this. So these were people that wanted this tracking. So according to this information, it's about 14% of people with a serious adverse reaction. But that reminds me, people that wanted to be tracked with the vaccination when they received that. It reminds me of the Informed Consent Action Network's vSafe dashboard. If you go to our website, you can go to this dashboard, and this was data that we received from the CDC. We started with a FOIA request. We took them to court. They were forced to give us the data from a vSafe system that they implemented where people could opt into this system to track their progress in any adverse events that they received from the COVID vaccine. And interestingly enough, when you look at this system, required care, that's that red box there, almost 780,000 people out of that over 10 million people required medical care. That's about 7.7% of the people we found. And if you add people that missed work, that's about 21% of people. So however you want to house serious adverse events, definitely requiring medical care seems to be a big one. But we're looking anywhere between 7.7 according to vSafe and about 13-14% according to this yellow card system of people. Now obviously these aren't robust studies. These are people that opted into these systems, but it gives us a window.
Yeah. In a totally flawed tracking system, we're seeing really high numbers. In a world where your doctor is telling you when you ask, I think it was the COVID vaccine, no way, that's perfectly safe. I mean, that is the problem. We've reported on it over and over again. Post-surveillance only works if the doctors are told to be looking for something. They've been told nothing to see here, and yet we are still seeing these alarming numbers coming through. I imagine they're much higher if you lived in a world where vaccine injury was accepted, recognized, and every doctor was taught to look for it instead of telling you you're crazy, you're making up, it's all in your head, which we hear from so many people, especially from the work that Bree Dresden's done with React 19. Almost every one of the people in that group was told, you're crazy, this is in your head. So how do we get to real raw numbers when that is how doctors are seeing these conversations? But that's huge. Yeah.
Let's look what's going on outside of America, starting with that UK inquiry. We saw the video, but let's go to South Korea. Here's the headline there. It's an exclusive. South Korea recognizes 15 new COVID-19 vaccine side effects for compensation. This is major. You can go into here and see what side effects, everything from Guillain-Barré syndrome, venous thrombosis, tinnitus, you got the ringing in the ears, abnormal uterine bleeding, facial nerve paralysis. But it goes on to say this. A KDCA official stated, even if a case is not among the 15 recognized conditions, if there's a plausible link to vaccination, we will review it for compensation in line with the special act's purpose. That's major. That's major. But now the Indian Supreme Court went a step further. This is really the high watermark I've seen in the world. Here's the headline. Why Supreme Court ordered a no-fault compensation policy for COVID vaccine side effects. It says the Supreme Court on Tuesday directed the center to formulate a no-fault compensation policy for individuals who suffered serious adverse effects or died after receiving COVID vaccines. The court ruled that families should not be forced to prove negligence in civil courts to claim relief for vaccine-related injuries. It goes on to say this: the court stated that the Constitution does not conceive of the state as a distant spectator of human suffering, but as an active guardian of welfare and dignity. It ruled that since the mass vaccination program was a state-led public health intervention, the state bears a positive obligation to support those who suffered grave outcomes, no matter how rare they are. Massive.
Yeah.
I mean, this should be the system that we all base, every country and government in the world bases their compensation scheme on. Canada had a private company. They hired a private company to take over their vaccine compensation for COVID. You can imagine how that went, but now that's all changed. Here's the headline. New program launched for vaccine-injured Canadians. They looked at the company and they found this, the government found this. The investigation found that of the $54 million the private firm Oxaro was given to operate the program, $36 million was spent on administration, while just over $21 million supported 250 vaccine-injured people since 2021. Now, this is all changed. This is the government saying that applicants aren't required to prove that anyone was negligent or responsible in order to be considered for financial support. Reads the new website, the VIAP. Medical experts review applications to determine whether a vaccine likely caused an injury. Eligibility for financial support is based on the severity of the injury and its long-term impact on daily life. It says the new call center will ensure applicants and claimants can reach program administrators. VIAP will also accept applications from 225 people who were previously denied support for missing a 3-year deadline. We have a 1-year deadline here with the CICP in America, so they're allowing those people that missed that deadline to reapply and to get compensation. So what's happening in America? Well, the only thing that's happening in America is not from the government. It is from React 19. They're making these headlines here. CDC set to officially recognize COVID-19 vaccine injury with unprecedented ICD-10 diagnostic code. So before this, now there's a 60-day window for comment. You can go to that article. You can go to the comment section there and comment. You have to the end of May to do that. But without that, obviously, we have under recognition, we have miscoding, difficulty tracking, difficulty researching. You don't have anything here. It's completely flying blind. There's very little people can do to get compensation. So many people miss the deadline of 1 year for CICP because nothing's tracked, nothing's coded.
And your doctor told you it wasn't the vaccine. I mean, how are you gonna figure something out in 365 days when you're literally being gaslit by the expert you went to get information on what's going on with you? It pisses me off. So,
the doors are wide open here.
Yeah.
The horse has left the barn. There's no going back on this. America is on notice. The rest of the world's moving forward. And even mainstream journalists are sounding the alarm on this. Here's Tucker Carlson. Take a listen.
All right.
I'm so upset about it. It's just killed too many people and it made too many women infertile. And it's just the most evil thing ever. And it's still on the schedule. And it's so immoral. It's hard to believe this is even happening. But he did exactly the same thing. Again, it's my fault for not being like, whoa, that's a red line. I can't cross it. But he did the same thing he did on the Iran war. When I talked to him about the Iran war, you say, well, like, this is hurting all these people. He's like, you don't believe in the polio vaccine? Like, that was a good vaccine, don't you think? It's like, I guess I believe in the polio. I don't know. I mean, but that's not what we're talking about. The polio vaccine is a totally different thing. I mean, I don't even know enough about it, even though we grew up next to the Salk Institute.
Yeah.
It's like, what does that have to do with it? You mentioned Iran. He's like, do you think they should have nuclear weapons? No, I don't think, not for nuclear weapons in general, but it was a non sequitur designed to shut down the conversation.
And the same tactic that's been employed by his political adversaries his entire political life.
Exactly.
I mean, it just kind of keeps going around, right? No matter what, when you get inside that swamp, in this country, it's just really hard to make the moves and get things happening. But I'm glad to see other places around the world are moving in the right direction. It's just a matter of time, Jeffrey. I mean, it's all collapsing around them. I mean, this whole facade, safe, effective, great, stops transmission, yada, yada, yada. It's coming apart at the seams. So we'll just, we're going to keep surfing this, Jeffrey. We've been at it from the beginning. Appreciate your reporting on this, though. And freaking potential for a cure for cancer. That's one of the coolest studies I've seen in a long time. Thanks for digging it out.
You bet. Yeah, this is exciting times.
All right, I'll see you next week. Well, I mean, look, when we like I said to Jeffrey just now, we've been on this. We have been talking about vaccines from the beginning. As soon as COVID hit, we're like, hold on a second, wait a minute. Warp speed? Have you seen the animal trials of mRNA? What are they doing locking us down? Where's the science on that? What about the mask? 95% effective. You're kidding me. And you know what happened to us for being like that? This is what happened to us. Yesterday, in the middle of the afternoon while we were putting this show together, we were removed from YouTube. We have never been told we have any strikes against us. There have been occasions where they took down videos. This is what the email said. We'd like to inform you that we received a complaint regarding your YouTube account, the HighWire Dell Bigtree. Upon review, we've determined that activity in your account violates our terms of service. As a result, we've terminated your account. There's no way we can stand for this type of suppression of free speech in the United States of America. I want to say to pharma and the dark powers of these lying, hypocritical health departments around the world, we are still here. It was an amazing moment. I had this fantastic team here rushed around. We found technology. We were able to get a player up and running. So those are the types of things that when you watch the show, you can't imagine how much is behind the scenes. In fact, you have no idea how many bots we have attacking our website on a constant basis. We're always having to upgrade, update, and then every once in a while, the political climate changes. And guess what? I can announce to you we are officially back up on YouTube. We'll see how long this lasts, but look, if YouTube is where you like to watch all of your other podcasts, then go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let's test it. Let's see. I would love it if everyone watching right now, whether even you use YouTube, I want them to see how many people subscribe. Like, oh my God, the HighWire is popular. Let's test them. Let's see how quickly they shut us down because there's just so many people interested in this information. Will you do me that like fun fact? Like, just hit it today. Just go and subscribe on YouTube, and then let's see, watch it live. You can watch it there. Let's see how long we last. This should be a lot of fun. You can follow us on the HighWire with Del Bigtree on YouTube, at HighWire Talk, at HighWire Plus, at Del Bigtree on almost every platform. It's a lot of fun. I'm having fun on my personal platform. Jeffrey Jackson, be tracking him. Look, this is the work that we do, and we don't care if we get censored. We charge bunkers. That's what we do, and we are going to keep doing it. We're also, if you can see the show, we really want to start getting into some of the positive information. Like, are there other treatments out there? We're talking about homeopathy now. Maybe there's a product that could get the spike protein in your body, or a cure for cancer. I hope you're watching us make some adjustments. We want to make this the place where you go, not to just get the information, not to get afraid of what's going on, not to know just what to stand up for, but what to be looking for as far as your own success. And maybe now you have a way forward with dementia. All of this is made possible because the donors like you that support our work. You also support our legal work, where we are going to the Supreme Court, folks. Got some major cases now on their route to the Supreme Court. If you want to see that happen, if you want to see us undo the 1905 decision that, keeps us all totally confined to forced vaccinations, then support us now. Let's bring that back up. We're looking for $26 for 2026. You just go to the top of the page, hit donate to ICANN. We'd love for you to make a recurring donation. That helps us know what, we can look forward to, what our balance sheet is, and how many new cases we can take on. And trust me, we say no all the time. I want to say no less and less. If you're listening right now, text me at 72022, 72022. Type in the word donate, and I'll respond immediately with a link so that you can become a recurring donor. What's the conversation that gets me in the middle of this? It's autism. I probably would still be a CBS producer, I think, in many ways. Well, actually, probably beyond that. I'd be exec producing, maybe even making movies and all sorts of stuff. I won an Emmy Award. Career was going great, but then I stumbled on autism. This story of autism on a whistleblower inside the CDC, what's causing autism, the big conversation. Every time you turn your TV, it's been debunked. We don't know what's causing autism, but we sure know what's not. You know what it looks like. It looks like this.
Autism rates have hit a record high, according to new CDC data.
It's a dramatic rise in autism diagnoses among children.
The CDC's new figures on autism showing a continuing rise in diagnoses.
Researchers found 1 in 31 children were diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder by the time of their 8th birthday.
In 2016, the prevalence was 1 in 54. In 2000, it was 1 in 150.
Boys were more than 3 times as likely to be identified with autism as girls, and it was more prevalent in minority children than whites.
Overall, the risk for boys of getting an autism diagnosis in this country is now 1 in 20.
Without question or controversy, this work really highlights, in the end of the day, how unbelievably common autism is in our communities.
When it comes to the conversation of autism, certainly going back years, a lot of people will bring up the name Dr. Andrew Wakefield, who was, of course, the director and co-producer on the documentary Vax, which puts me in the middle of this conversation, why I'm here on the HighWire today. But there's a name that goes back maybe even further that got into similar investigations that you may not know, and that is Dr. William Shaw. And it's my honor and pleasure to be joined by him now. Dr. Shaw.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here.
All right, it's great to have you. There is so much I want to talk to you about, but I want to sort of, just take us through the timeline of your experience as a scientist, as a doctor. To begin with, you worked at the CDC for some time.
Right.
What did you do at the CDC?
CDC, I was with the National Nutrition Survey that had trailers that went over all 50 states and collected blood and urine samples to learn the nutritional status of people in the United States. It was because of Congress was saying we don't have enough information, so they started this thing called the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, which abbreviation comes HANES, and which is still in operation today.
So you studied blood samples, urine samples. So you were looking at not just what the food supply was, but how, I'm assuming, it was affecting the human body?
Right. And I was looking at the vitamins, the minerals that people had in their body fluids, and were there any that were particularly low. And so iron and vitamin A were ones that ended up being commonly low of the common vitamins tested. But also I was very interested in metabolic testing to look at everything in the body's metabolism simultaneously. We look at hundreds of things at one time. And the way it was done, it was a process, it was called organic acids. So I started that learning how to do that while I was at CDC. That was my most important thing. And I also went to microbiologists who were determining what microorganisms were there. They would culture them, and then they would extract the molecules from what the bacteria produced, and from that they were able to say what species it was. So it was much faster than the typical way. And I remember one of the species was called Clostridia, which can be very deadly. And I asked them, well, why do you have to culture them? Why can't you just, if somebody's infected with it, why can't you just test their urine? They said, nobody's ever done that before. And I kind of put that away. Many years later, I retrieved that and indeed did that without going through the culture. If microorganisms are in your intestinal tract, they'll produce chemicals that get absorbed into the bloodstream. When the blood is filtered through the kidneys, it becomes urine. And so everything that's in your body at one time will be in your urine. So urine is the most useful body fluid for testing humans because everything is concentrated there. And knowing what had happened at CDC, I was able to identify that Clostridia bacteria were one of the major causes of autism.
So let's get into that because, I think parents of autistic children tend to know your name probably more than your average, American citizen. But that's because you started the Great Plains Laboratory.
Correct.
So was that soon after leaving CDC you went and decided you wanted to get into that metabolic testing?
I went into an intermediate, which was the Children's Hospital in Kansas City.
Okay.
And there I set up the testing for, it was supposed to be for genetic diseases. And we tested for all the genetic diseases. But what I found is there were chemicals in the urine that weren't due to any genetic disease. When I looked at medical records, though, I saw the kids were normal until they started giving them antibiotics. And after they had the antibiotics, they started getting sick or having ADD or seizure disorders. And so I presumed that those chemicals were coming from the microorganisms. And so at that time, everybody who did this in labs throughout the world were only focused on the genetic diseases.
Mm-hmm.
And I went the exact opposite. I started only focusing on the stuff that everybody else was ignoring. And that was the best decision I ever made in my life. I got a patent on using these chemicals from microorganisms and found that they are the most common causes of all diseases, especially ones that people say there's no cure or we don't know anything about it. Almost surely all those are due to the gut flora, meaning the bacteria, the fungus, and other microorganisms, viruses that are in your intestinal tract are the cause of all diseases. And so I focused on two brothers with autism who were very similar.
Is this once you started your laboratory
at the
Great Plains?
Children's Hospital?
Oh, it's still the Children's Hospital. You're still there, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So the work I got at Children's Hospital was then transferred to Great Plains, because they wanted to go too slow. They wanted to be 5% of my activity. I saw that. At that time, I thought this is the most.
So like you can do 5% of what you want to do.
Yeah.
Your other 95% has to be what we want you focused on.
I thought that's a good idea, but this is the most important discovery maybe of this century. You know?
Yeah.
And so I thought, I'm shaking my head yes, but in my head I'm thinking no. You know, I can't make this a little. This is by far the biggest discovery, and of course I got a patent. A colleague of mine who was a pediatric neurologist came across these two brothers who had severe autism, but they also had a muscle weakness that was so severe that when they would try to stand up, their legs would just fall out from under them. But it was periodic. It was sometimes they were able to walk okay, and sometimes they were just overcome. And this pediatric neurologist also had the same kind of mass spectrometers that I had, except his was an older version.
Mm-hmm.
So he couldn't find the cause of their illness. And he told the mother, why don't you see Shaw? He's got the latest and greatest of the scientific instruments. And I explained to the mother when she came that many diseases ebb and flow. So the severity gets real intense, and then they may go toward. So I said, you can't just do one sample because you might miss the peak of one of these waves. So to do as many as you can. And then she kind of disappeared, and as I thought, maybe she's forgotten about it. But then I was paged to come to the main lab, and she had a giant shopping bag full of frozen urine samples, which were more urine samples than we tested in an entire month at the Children's Hospital. So when I tested them, at first I was focused on, was there any of these instances of genetic disease? But there weren't any. And I thought, there's got to be I knew as a biochemist that everything has a cause. But once I focused on the things that everybody else was ignoring, I saw those were extremely abnormal compared to a normal child's urine. Things were much higher. And then I started looking at where were these coming from. I found they were coming from yeast such as Candida, and ultimately from the Clostridia, because I had the experience at CDC. The thing is, in the human body, they were altering the structure of the molecules produced by the Clostridia, so they didn't match exactly with the ones that are produced in culture by the Clostridia. They were modified. So I had to use my biochemical knowledge.
The body was modifying them?
The body was taking the thing from the Clostridia and then changing it, but not changing it so much that I didn't recognize that must have come from the Clostridia and then was changed by the human body to an alternate substance. And that became, it's probably my most important research finding. I mean, I think that it even is possible to get a Nobel Prize if enough people learn about it. The problem is getting the information out. And I also found the same.
What year? So we're back. I mean, this has been plenty of time for CDC to know this, NIH to know this, FDA to know this. You're essentially saying that this Clostridia bacteria, which is also a component of yeast or overgrowth of yeast, is that correct?
It's a separate organism, but they're commonly found together.
Okay.
So a lot of times the antibiotics that will kill, the common antibiotics will kill the beneficial organisms, but they leave the pathogens like Candida and Clostridia.
Okay.
And they overgrow the intestine. So that's what I found is virtually every kid with autism had these, and we did the first study.
Had heightened rates of
these things that weren't found in normal people. And I got a patent on the use of these chemicals, and all this was published, and there was quite a bit of excitement, and of course the first thing we wanted to do is some of the stuff was from Candida, so well maybe we could use antifungal drugs. Meanwhile, my pediatric neurologist colleague had been recruited to come to the same hospital that I was at, Dr. Enrique Chavez, and he said that there were 23 children, all of them had hypotonia, meaning low muscle tone. So that was why those two original kids would lose their ability to stand up. They would just fall down when they tried to stand up because the Candida was so bad. And the two original children, where we did about 50 tests, showed a clear pattern of, the Candida and the Clostridia. And so we decided, with the help of Dr. Chavez, we put together a research grant and obtained antifungal drugs to treat the children. And that ended up being a very common one. I would say 60 to 70% of people with autism had this. The thing that was so unbelievable was you could treat them for a month or even 3 months and then stop. Once you stopped, the autism would return and the Candida would return. And you could see it with the test that had come back. The question was, why?
Right, because I mean, you should be clearing it, right? You should
be. Yeah, why is this? And so one of the things that I've entertained and I think should be examined by the government, the FDA and so forth, is the fact that a study was done in Germany that found when you gave the measles vaccine to children, it knocked out their immunity, but only to Candida. It didn't knock their immunity against any other thing. It was specific for Candida. And so I thought nothing happened. It was just, it just got forgotten.
Huh.
And I thought, of course, this isn't proof, but, there's so many kids. So one colleague of mine, an MD, PhD psychiatrist, his child was on antifungal drugs for 30 years. He couldn't stop it. And this was not an unusual pattern. This was almost all the children had that same
So once
pattern.
You stop, so we naturally have immunity where our body goes, fights off, an overgrowth of Candida, but a child that's been turned off or triggered off by something, and so it just runs throughout their body. So even when you take on antifungals, as soon as you stop, their body never learns to fight it.
Yep, sometimes within 24 hours.
And so your discovery of this is, we're like, what, 1980s, 90s now?
Probably 80s and 90s. You know, and so all these things were going simultaneously, and we found out that autism wasn't the only disease. This was prevalent in many, many different diseases, all the psychiatric diseases. We were able to obtain a complete reversal of severe schizophrenia just by an antibiotic.
And so, just so people understand, your laboratory is, I would say, cited by almost every doctor and scientist that has moved in the space of truly studying autoimmune dysregulation, gut dysbiosis. Your laboratory became the laboratory that every scientist and doctor that was asking the questions outside of what you said, moving out of genetics and saying, what are the environmental toxins? What are the things that are happening to bodies? I want to get to the bottom of this. Your laboratory, as you know, to this date, is still the
pioneers.
The pioneers, the #1 laboratory. All these scientists and doctors that are making discoveries are going through. So you're not just looking at these 2 autistic children. How many autistic?
Over 1 million.
Over 1 million.
And this isn't just in the United States. This is all throughout the world. So myself and my laboratory staff have trained physicians over the entire world to learn how to utilize the testing and also the treatments. You know, we can't prescribe the treatment, but we can tell the physician, this is what you need to do in order to get the patient well. And we've had some complete successes, which are on videotape, of a child with severe autism who was treated and became quickly, completely well. And this was diagnosed by the physician in charge of the Missouri Autism Project. And she said she diagnosed him when he had autism, and she diagnosed him when he recovered. And she said, he's completely normal. And she said, no, I want to take that back. He's not completely normal. He's much smarter than the normal child. Mm-hmm. And he's happy. He's engaging with the other children. He's trying to help the other children. She said, it's just remarkable how good he's done.
In all this work, you were formerly at the CDC. You're now the pioneer. You're taking in millions of samples. You've already on here and then even made a very strong statement that Candida and Clostridia are, directly affecting this issue we're looking at as autism. Did the FDA ever reach out to the NIH? Did our government ever say, we'd like to come or bring you in and say, we want to look at what you're studying here because this is critical?
The only thing they did, they took a couple of the kids who had recovered and brought them and did additional testing. That's the only thing they did.
That was it. Meanwhile, you've watched as, really prior to Robert Kennedy Jr., all of the investigation of autism by our government agencies has been on the genetic link. Exactly what you said. You ran from the Children's Hospital. Here you are showing this is not necessarily genetics. Now, I suppose there might be a genetic predisposition to having a reaction to antibiotics or something like that. Or
yeah. But what I found is the main things were environmental factors, not genetic factors.
And so what have been your thinking as you've watched the government of the United States lead this charge to keep saying it's genetic, we're looking for the genetic markers? Have you just been scratching your head the whole time?
I think I was disappointed. I thought the pharmaceutical industry had such a lock on treatment, the medical treatment, that they tried to force out almost any other mode of treatment. And so it's even in the, for example, lately we were interested in Alzheimer's disease. Mm-hmm. And Alzheimer's disease has beta amyloid deposits. Well, candida and mold in the intestinal tract cause beta amyloid to be formed. Amyloid is an anti-candida molecule. It's produced by the immune system to fight candida. And they've actually, people who do autopsies found candida in the brain of people who had Alzheimer's and mold as well. And so both of those cause amyloid.
So our
to form.
focus should really be on treating mold and candida.
Right. Instead, it's the pharmaceutical companies want to find the gold mine, and their main goal is not to find what completely treats a disease. They want to find a drug that makes a person somewhat better for life, but
to
never
survive the disease, just survive it.
Survive it. That's right. And so, to my mind, there should be a change in how things are rewarded. There should be rewards for people who eliminate disease, not just find new ways of making money with the disease.
I find it fascinating because obviously I've worked, I made a film with Dr. Andrew Wakefield. So shortly after you're making this discovery yourself in studying urine samples that candida and gut flora is affecting this issue called autism, which up until that moment, that would have been like crazy talk because it's a neurological disorder or it's a brain injury, right? It's somewhere in the brain and you're saying, hold on a second. No, it's directly being affected by the gut. Meanwhile, across the ocean, are you communicating? Because that's exactly, Andy Wakefield does the Lancet study of 12 children that have come to him because he's a gastroenterologist, not a neurologist, It's not about the brain. Those parents came to him saying, our children have a serious gut issue that's a lot like your papers on Crohn's disease.
Yeah.
And he says, but I'm a Crohn's disease expert. I don't know anything about autism. Like we're not talking about the autism. We're talking about the gut disease that seemed to start right after the autism. And I remember that's maybe probably the most controversial study in the history of all of science and medicine. It gets retracted. And all he said there in that paper was, this paper does not show a direct link between MMR vaccine and autism. More studies need to be done on that. But what it did show was a unique gut disorder that seemed to be affiliated with the autism. And I remember he said to me, what really blew our minds was the day that we would clear their stomachs, preparing them the next day they were going to have a colonoscopy so we could study the intestinal system. But when we cleared their gut, all of a sudden, many of them, their mannerisms and their repetitive disorders would disappear.
Because a lot of their gut flora were being cleaned out.
And were you in contact with Andy at that moment? Or are you two making this similar discovery?
We know each other, and he's been at several conferences.
After the fact, though, right? Or right at that moment?
No, he was, while he was doing these studies, we had him several times, both in Kansas City and in Spain.
So you two were both looking at this same issue?
At the abnormal intestinal flora, or abnormal things that are going on in the intestine that we think are connected with autism.
Do you feel like it's significant enough that it's a marker of sorts? Can you say that a child with autism has this likelihood of...
So my paper on Clostridia now has been confirmed in laboratories throughout the world. And a study in China found that if you have a high Clostridia metabolite, you don't need psychological studies. You have autism if you have this elevated in your urine sample.
So there's a level of which Clostridia that if someone showed you a urine sample and says this level of Clostridia, you'd say that's an autistic child.
You have autism.
Wow.
It was 96% if you have one of the Clostridia. It was like 98.5% certain if you had 3 of the Clostridia metabolites that were elevated. And so then the next big question was, why is the Clostridia elevated?
Right.
And a study on children with autism, triplets who had autism, showed they all had high levels of glyphosate, the weed killer. which is Roundup.
Roundup, yep. In fact, just in a couple of days, we are hosting a march against the Supreme Court where they're going to try and give liability protection to Roundup. So I'm deeply involved in this issue.
So it's extremely bad because the glyphosate is not only involved with non-Hodgkin's leukemia, it's involved in almost every kind of disease, but not due to the direct toxicity of the glyphosate. In addition to being a weed killer, it's a killer of beneficial organisms in your intestinal tract. So all of the harmful organisms, so for example, we tested a person with severe amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, which is known as Lou Gehrig's disease, after the famous baseball player who got it.
ALS.
ALS.
Yeah.
And that person had the worst dysbiosis of any patient I ever had.
And dysbiosis meaning bacteria, gut flora is just totally out of whack.
Had high Clostridia, high amounts of candida, high amounts of mold. They were all extremely, the highest I've ever seen. And lots of published papers indicate that the dysbiosis, the abnormal flora, is a major cause. That stuff is absorbed from the intestinal tract, and then some of these molecules impair the blood-brain barrier, and they get into the brain and kill the motor neurons, which are the neurons that are affected in ALS. So if somebody came to me today to say, what would I do with a patient? I said, you do this test. It's called the organic acid test, which you can still do at the lab called Mosaic. With the other thing, this person had the highest glyphosate I've ever seen. So it was pretty obvious that the glyphosate had killed all the normal flora in this person. So the first thing you would need to do is say, don't eat any food that's not organic. Take high doses of probiotics, meaning beneficial bacteria, and other things to kill any specific pathogens that are there. But so I think ALS will be treated. I will sit here today and saying it will be treated, and will be treated once the dysbiosis is addressed and treated. That will be the last case of
So fix
ALS.
the gut health, and then you will see a cure to ALS. And sort of similarly, I guess, you're looking at Alzheimer's. You mentioned 3 triplets with autism that moved you just away from being straight about Clostridia and yeast to glyphosate. What was it about those 3 kids that made that you thought
what happened is the glyphosate caused the Clostridia to reach high levels.
So why did they have particularly high levels of glyphosate, these triplets?
Yeah, because their mother was of Mexican descent, and so corn tortillas are the favorite food of most Mexican people of Mexican origin. They were eating them with every meal, plus snacks, so they were getting them probably 5 times a day. Once I told the mother, who was a physician, about this, she took them off that. The glyphosate, we tested a couple weeks later, and it had dramatically reduced. 95% of all people in this country have some glyphosate. There's only a small, maybe 2 or 3% who have no detectable glyphosate.
Wow.
But there's a difference between having some and having giant, these children had giant elevated values. To me, glyphosate is probably the #1 cause of autism. And the correlation study, people will say correlation doesn't mean proof, but if you have the mechanism by which glyphosate does that, which is by killing the beneficial bacteria and causing the pathogens to grow, its correlation is valid. It was like a 99% correlation between the amount of glyphosate in use in the United States and the autism rate.
Was there glyphosate when you first started, when you looked at those first 2 kids at the Children's Hospital? Is glyphosate being used then?
No, there's a glyphosate I think it was probably the 90s that glyphosate started being used.
But your theory at that moment with those two kids, it was the antibiotics that they'd been on that wiped out.
Antibiotics and perhaps Tylenol as well.
Yeah.
The brand name acetaminophen is and in Europe they use the word paracetamol.
Right. Hold on the Tylenol point for a second because that's a little bit different. But I'm trying to connect several things here. You start out saying you're looking at the wrong thing. These are not genetic issues. These are toxic issues and toxins, I believe, that are in the gut. You prove that. You see these heightened rates to the point where you can tell someone they're autistic, not even by meeting them, by looking at their samples and seeing.
You just say what's the value of this in the urine.
So that's pretty good proof. If you can pull that magic trick, then I think we should be looking at it. Now, the gut biome early on, we don't have glyphosate, so you have Tylenol. You mentioned MMR vaccine can kill, create this growth or an immune.
The measles portion of it.
The measles part
was destroying the cellular immunity to Candida.
And now we cut to a more modern issue, but it's really the same problem. It's still, this overgrowth of bad bacteria in the gut. But now you're saying, on top of the fact that we're giving antibiotics to kids, on top of the fact that no one seemed to stop the measles vaccine or see if there was some genetic susceptibility that was creating this issue, now enters a chemical product that is sprayed on 80 to 90% of our crops. As you pointed out, we're all eating it. But you're saying it's not really the toxin or the poison itself, it's what it's doing to the gut biome. And a lot of people have said one of the big issues with glyphosate is it is an antibiotic, that it is
right, that
is affecting your gut as though you're taking antibiotics.
Yeah. In addition to killing weeds, it's killing most of the beneficial, the bifidobacteria, lactobacilli, which help to keep your health. So those are being wiped out. And so every person that I saw who had high amounts of glyphosate had dysbiosis.
And that dysbiosis now, there's a lot of people that talk about watching an adult regress with Alzheimer's, that it's a lot like watching a child with autism. Slowly, they have all sorts of issues. Your laboratory is the heart of this now called, same really is turned over into Mosaic.
Yeah.
All right, is the Great Plains Laboratory that you started. And so now you're publishing on glyphosate. You've been focused on Clostridia and Candida, but now glyphosate's your focus, and in particular ALS, which is one of the most debilitating, horrific diseases that they just can't seem to get their heads wrapped around. You're like, it's pretty simple. You have gut dysbiosis.
It's relatively rare, but of 4 people tested, all 4 had the dysbiosis. So,
wow. So
to me, for a rare disease, if you test 4 or 4, there could be some coincidence. You need more data. I think everybody who has ALS, especially at the beginning, should be testing for this phenomenon.
All right.
And you still have bureaucrats, like the state of New York does not permit that testing.
Doesn't permit it?
No.
They could block you from testing things you want to test?
Yeah. They said, if you start doing this in New York, we're going to sue you and make you take down your website and all this other crap. So because of that, I said, I'm just not going to do business in New York. I mean, they wanted me to take out the word dysbiosis from all the marketing material. I said, it's in the National Library of Medicine, 1,000 articles. Why can't I put it on my website? Oh, no, we don't. So I don't know if there's money involved, but or they're just, they have a bureaucracy mutation or something.
Well, I mean, certainly Robert Kennedy Jr., ran for president saying the corruption of our regulatory agencies and really the infiltration by the pharmaceutical industry is corrupting all of our science. It's certainly, from what you're stating, if you have states that are saying you can't even study what's going on inside of your body, you're not allowed to use this word dysbiosis, you can't look at gut bacteria, that's just...
I mean, it's like 1984, where...
madness.
But, certain words are forbidden.
Look, your work, I think, is critical. Obviously, you know, I want to talk to you about Tylenol, but why don't we do it on Off the Record, which is going to be our show. I know that some of the studies you've done were actually cited by Robert Kennedy Jr. When he made the statement that they recommended that pregnant women not take Tylenol. I want to know what you know about that. We'll talk about that on Off the Record. My last question to you is, in all this work, decades now of work, I understand why pharmaceutical industry corrupts data and tries to sell products, but you've watched what is supposed to be the greatest regulatory agencies in the world, the greatest nation in the world in America, the best hospital systems, absolutely stand in the way of progress. Progress, you know, on discoveries you and Andy Wakefield and others like you, and even to this date, we see more and more studies still looking at fecal transplant studies showing that if you change the, you know, in rats, you can literally just put healthy gut biome in a rat that they've, you know, trained to be autistic, and they're seeing those results. How do you explain why government agencies don't want the truth?
After working, I think it was 6 years at CDC, the bureaucracy there was stifling. It was so, the smallest thing had to be approved by 7 levels of different supervisors. And so it really is, some of these agencies stifle creativity. So everything that I did was of importance. I did because I pushed it out myself. Like, one of the things I did there was a mathematical algorithm where if you use this complex mathematical term called a logit, you could take the radioactivity in the test versus the concentration, and it would make a straight line. And people at the National Institutes of Health saying it was just a coincidence. So in my spare time, I remember the story of Einstein. When I worked out the mathematics of it in my spare time, and if my supervisor came, I pushed it into the center drawer so they didn't see how it. So that was all working on my own. It wasn't because CDC said to do it. It's because I thought people would be pleased to know there was a mathematical theory, and I got it. And then the head of the Clinical Chemist Society was so impressed. He said, "You need to present this to the board of the medical journal that deals with clinical chemistry. You know, this is one of the great discoveries." And so that was Einstein did the same thing when he was working on his theories in the Swiss patent office. When his supervisor came, he pressed his equations into a center drawer. So I always got a kick out of that I was working on one of the tricks that Einstein used to employ.
Amazing. Well, Dr. Shaw, what an incredible life's work you've been up to. I want to thank you for sharing here on the HighWire, because we want the truth to be out there. And I think we are starting to see some movement here. There's obviously, you've affected over a generation of MAPS doctors and doctors that are doing work with children suffering from all sorts of autism, but also autoimmune issues, all of that. And I'm sure there's people who are now have family members with Alzheimer's and things like that. And it's fascinating. It all does seem to be coming back to the gut biome. I've always said, every time I see another study that, you know, your mental health is connected to your stomach, I always joke, I think that headline should read, "Dr. Andrew Wakefield is right." Now I'm going to say it means that Dr. Shaw and Dr. Wakefield were right. But it'd be great to get you, in front of Robert Kennedy Jr. and Dr. McCary and Dr. Oz. I think this is really important. We could actually maybe get to some solutions while we have a short window here. But I want to thank you for joining us today.
Yeah. Thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. You know, as we were planning on this show, I first reached out to Dr. Shaw on the Tylenol issue because that was, you know, everyone's like, well, where'd that come from? Robert Kennedy Jr. is making that statement. But as fate would have it, you know, we just couldn't quite get the timing until just now. And here we find ourselves in Autism Awareness Month, which makes this a super interesting conversation. But also, we are now just days away from marching in Washington, D.C., and I did not know that this conversation was going to lead to glyphosate really until this conversation and the recent study that Dr. Shaw just did. So now you realize what we are up against. We are up against government agencies that are acting just like corrupt industries, like pharma, that hide their data, that block any, you know, solutions or any investigations that might lead to actually healing issues like autism, like Alzheimer's, like ALS. And instead of investing the billions of dollars moving through our regulatory agencies to at least send a few people over to Great Plains Laboratory, and why don't you meet with Dr. Shaw, and why don't we start running serious tests nationwide, worldwide, see if this really is repeatable? Can we come up with a solution? Is there, you know, is it, you know, do we change our vaccine schedule? Do we think about antibiotics differently? Do we look at this chemical we're spraying all over all of our food? And instead of doing that, we're on the verge of our government signing papers for the Supreme Court to give liability protection to this poison that may be one of the greatest cause of disease and illness we have ever seen on this earth. So as you consider what you're going to do with your weekend and whether or not you should go to Washington, D.C., I want you to think about what you will do when you lay in bed at night and watch that you could have stood for something, you could have stood up for something. You could have been like Dr. Shaw and taken it in your own hands and said, I'm at least going to go to Washington, D.C. and make my presence known that I do not want my children or my grandchildren or the future of this world to have no options out, no ways to sue, no market forces, and a corrupted government and corrupt, industries that are making all of our decisions for us. That's what I really think is on the line here. So I hope I'll see you in Washington, D.C., April 27th in front of the Supreme Court, because I think this is actually the biggest issue, certainly of the week, maybe of the year, one of the biggest in our lifetime. And this is why we do this work.
For decades, Bayer and Monsanto have poisoned our food and our families with glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup. And now, facing over 170,000 cancer lawsuits worth $16 billion, Bayer wants the Supreme Court to bail them out. It's time for the people to take a stand. On April 27th, we will march together at the Supreme Court. America demands equal justice under the law, with no immunity for chemical companies. It's the people versus poison, April 27th in Washington, D.C.
Well, obviously, that's just around the corner. I am packing bags as soon as I leave here today. I actually start traveling tomorrow. Several speaking events that land me finally on Monday in Washington, D.C. Come up, say hi. I would love to see you there. There's going to be so many amazing speakers, including some politicians, like one of my favorites, Thomas Massie, a guy that just has not, stepped away from his principles. He is going to be speaking there, and so many other great speakers, including one of our favorites, Zen Honeycutt, who joins me now. Zen, I'm getting pretty pumped. I mean, Monday is such a big deal. And, when I think about all the people, you've crossed into all the different conversations we've had. There's some people that are going to be that are just straight up about food, which is really cool. We don't all need to be totally aligned on the vaccine thing, but boy, that commonality, that liability, protection, all those people that are complaining for decades about the 1986 Act, sure would be great to see them stepping out and standing up and not letting that happen again. But what are your thoughts? What do we need to be focused on? Of course, there's people, I know there's people at home with children. There's school going on. Not everyone can make it. But what should be our focus as a population right now when it comes to this issue of glyphosate?
Well, speaking up bravely and boldly, as you have been saying for a very long time now, is the number one thing to do. Of course, buying organic is urgent. Showing up in DC. If you can drive there, be there. If you can afford to fly there, be there. I mean, this is probably never going to happen again. I hope it
know.
never does.
We
This is
never
a
need to
once
again,
in a
right? Like, let's show them when you do things
Yeah.
like this, it doesn't work out for you.
Yeah, let's be there, let's show up and make it known not only to the Supreme Court and to the president, to this administration, but to all the elected officials who want our vote coming the midterm election, that we are not going to stand for this, that we will not allow these corporations to get immunity from lawsuit. It's a basic principle to be accountable for safety. We're not against capitalism. Make all the products you want, sell all the products you want, but make them safe, or you're going to have a tidal wave of moms coming after you and others. There's a lot of other people who are going to be there. The speaker lineup is going to be phenomenal. And, I have to say that the coming farm bill that's going to be hitting the floor this week, it is perfect timing for us to be there and to be showing up that day. At 4:00, there's going to be a hearing in Rayburn about the EPA with Lee Zeldin is going to be put on the spot. We need MAHA people there. We need to show up.
Just to be clear, explain what this means, the Farm Bill. They're hedging their bet. It's not just happening in the Supreme Court, just what is in the Farm Bill, right, that we should be worried about. Because even if we win at the Supreme Court level, it may circumvent, go around us, and get in through the Farm Bill. So tell me just a little bit about what we need to be worrying about in that Farm Bill right now.
Yeah, so Bayer and ChemChina are having a heyday right now, right? They've got people who are basically, I think, traitors to democracy and to health that are championing the pesticide immunity shield in 3 branches of government: in our judicial, which you just talked about with the Supreme Court. If this court goes in favor of Bayer, they're going to get immunity. This is going to be disastrous for human health. Then we've got executive and legislative. And in the Farm Bill, the legislative branch, we've got section 10202. Most people are not talking about this. There are sections 10202, which requires the EPA to coordinate with the USDA and to consider the benefits of these pesticides. Del, they're basically saying the quiet part out loud, which is we're going to make it legal to put business before health and safety. So before the EPA could ban a pesticide, they have to consider what the USDA says about how beneficial that pesticide is for farmers, right? So this is just outrageous. Section 10204 extends a statutory deadline for the EPA to not do pesticide reviews for 5 years.
What?
Until 2031. And that's because the glyphosate review on endocrine disruption is due this year. That's why they're doing that.
It's sort of like, it's another version of grass, right? We're just going to generally recognize it as safe for at least 5 years, at which point how much damage is done. And it's amazing a modern society even would allow itself to be caught thinking like this, right? We're just not going to think about the casualties for 5 years. Let's just wreak mayhem, give it 5 years, and then we'll get around to taking a look at it.
Yeah, and it's not like they haven't been reviewing it for 15 years already.
Right.
And it's not like they don't have access to science that shows it's endocrine disrupting and hormone disrupting. So this is just an outrageous pushback of regulation because Bayer and ChemChina want to sell more toxins, right? That's what this is all about. Then section 10205, that's the uniformity of pesticide labeling. That is what it actually says it blocks state, local, and courts' rights, effectively giving these corporations immunity from lawsuits by saying, the EPA labels law. We didn't have to warn you that it causes cancer because the EPA did not, that it's playing that whole game and it would override even our court systems. It's outrageous. Wow. And then 10206 bans local governments from implementing pesticide restrictions. This affects hundreds, if not thousands, of towns and cities across the country that have already gotten glyphosate banned in their state, their parks, their schools, their homeowners associations. Del, on Moms Across America, we have an action page drop down with Toxin Free Town. And in that campaign, we have a document that says 10 alternatives to Roundup that has been downloaded 100,000 times by American citizens like you. So that's people that have fought hard, worked for months, if not years, to get glyphosate out of their cities and their towns and their parks and their playgrounds. So all of that work would be wiped out if this passes. This is outrageous. And then 10207, it loosens restrictions on pesticides and allows more toxins in our water. I mean, could you imagine a worse thing? And then, 10211, it collect data, but it also, it puts pressure on the EPA it does not put pressure on the EPA to speed up backlog safety reviews, right? It reduces the pressure on them. So they can just delay and delay and delay, and we don't need that. So the good news is that Representative Nancy Mace has put forth an amendment to take all of these sections out. It's called Subtitle C Part 1. So that's amendment number 301. That's what you want to get on your phone right now and call your House of Representatives. And I believe the number is 202-221-312 or 224-201-224-3121. And you can ask for your House representative, and you can call them and tell them you want them to support Amendment 301, which would take all of those nasties out. Now, Pingree and Massey and Fitzpatrick and Klein and Boebert, there's a whole list of other people who have gotten together to support the Pingree-Massey amendment, which is taking out 105, 106, and 107. That's good, but that's not, I'm sorry, it's not good enough. We want all of them taken out. And we're very grateful that Representative Nancy Mace has put forth this, this amendment to take all of them out. So that's the main thing to focus on right now, because it's going to the floor in the Rules Committee, which is where they will decide whether or not to allow amendments, right? And that decision will be on Monday at 4 p.m., the same time as the EPA meeting. So we're going to have to divide and conquer people who go to the rally. We're going to have to split up somehow and make sure that we have, showing at both of them. And then later on in the week, probably on Wednesday, the entire House floor will vote on this farm bill. And we want them to take all of these sections out. And if they don't, they got to vote no.
Well, it sure sounds like a good week to visit Washington, D.C. and have your voice be heard. Zen, I can't wait to see you there. Of course, we will get you all of that information. Just sign up to our newsletter. We'll make sure you get all those numbers that you can call your representative. Definitely, glad that Representative Mace has gotten involved here.
Yeah.
So many great
One more thing, Del.
Yeah.
One more thing, that the next day, Moms Across America and EWG and several other groups are working together to lobby. So we're going to be meeting with our staffer, representatives of staffers. And if you want to sign up, go to Instagram right now, and we have a sign up for lobbying that day. It's not paid, it's volunteer. And you don't have to know how to do it. We just want a lot of people there to show our representatives. And it does matter. It does matter that we show up. So please show up if you can.
I agree. It's a great thing to bring your kids along with. I mean, that's how they learn how to do this when they get older. That's what my mom used to do. And of course, it was groups like yours, Moms Across America, and some of these, vaccine freedom, health freedom groups grabbed me off the Vax bus and dragged me into some capitals and said, hey, come lobby with us. It's actually really a lot of fun to do as a group. So if you have time, you can stay an extra day. Go to Moms Across America on Instagram, you said, and sign up to do a lobby day the next day. But look, you're gonna want to be able to say you were there. This is how we make history. This is how we do it together. This is how we stand together. We have our voices heard. You can go to the peopleversuspoison.org. You can sign up. Tell us you're going to be there, so we have some sense of how many volunteers we need to help direct traffic. You can also buy a T-shirt there. You can click on and buy a People versus Poison. Go grab some merch. That's how we're funding the live broadcast, which is going to be streamed all over so many different platforms. You can obviously watch it here at the HighWire.com. Zen, I'll see you in Washington, D.C. Keep up the good work. And everybody call your representative and tell them, get all of this garbage out of the farm bill. I'm not down. I don't want any liability protection. I want the right to avoid pesticides. I want our states to have state rights that supersede federal rights. That is really, honestly, it's a conservative principle, which is shocking. I know you and I both grew up as liberals, but even I am like, states' rights matters. It's really crazy to watch this administration allowing this type of conversation to go on. But we're going to make that right.
There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure
Yep.
from the chemical companies, but guess what? We are hundreds of millions of people. We buy food if we buy organic, and we vote. We speak up.
Yeah.
So we want the representatives to hear us. We need to show up and be there. This is not just a protest. This is a rally. This is a gathering of like-minded people, many of us who have been very affected by these chemicals. But the thing is, what I teach people when you do public speaking is it's the people who are the most affected that are the most effective. And that's the people that are going to show up. So you're going to meet your new best friends when you go there. It's going to be a day to remember. I'm probably going to cry because I've been working on this for 14 years, and we're finally going to have a massive rally against glyphosate, but for state rights and freedom and health. It's going to be fantastic, Del. I can't wait to see you, and I can't wait to see everybody else.
All right, I'll see you there. Thanks for taking time today to jump in, get us all pumped up and inspired. Zen Honeycutt, I'll see you on Monday. All right. Well, I mean, look. You're such a great audience. The Informed Consent Action Network is one of the best networks there is. People come on here and they say, look, when we bring a book, people buy our book when they come on the HighWire. You go and you donate to GoFundMe's and things like that when there is need. If you have time, if there's any way at all to get to Washington, D.C., I think this is really important. Look at the interview. I have to go back and watch it over and over again and unpack how much we just talked about with Dr. William Shaw there. But, I mean, to watch that trajectory to where he is already and then comes to the conclusion, I think glyphosate actually now is our biggest issue with this. ALS, autism, all these things destroying our gut biome, making it impossible for us to heal. Even when you do heal, it just keeps coming back. All of these issues. Come on. This is not a product that should have liability protection. What happens if they are able to just, force states' rights and take away, the free market? The world's watching us. And so I hope you'll be there so we can be loud, proud, stand up for America, be that beacon of light and hope. Anyway, I want to thank you for joining us this week. And by the way, if you can't make it, I get it. Then at least watch it on the HighWire. Share it with everyone you know. Let them know, hey, check out the HighWire on Monday. Really important issue. And of course, we'll be posting all along that time where you can call, what your representatives. So if you want some, friends that you think might be interested, and I've said it before, this is a crossover issue. This is food. This is pesticides and herbicides. I'm telling you, I grew up a Democrat. They really care about this issue too. Republicans do. This is something where we can get outside of those boxes where we've been at each other's throats. Let's find commonality here. I think this is a super important issue. It is going to affect our health moving forward. All right, so enough said. I'll see those of you that make it to Washington, D.C. on Monday. I'll see the rest of you next week on the HighWire.